Even in the strictest lockdown, there are some things which can't be stopped. And so in households which had to be closed to the world, some people still had to cope with the very worst.
He was in a lot of pain. And it was so hard to watch. But our wishes were to be together, and we were together.
Cathy and Paul were married 35 years. When Paul was diagnosed with terminal cancer during the first lockdown, they decided against the chemotherapy which might have prolonged his life because the restrictions on hospital visits might have meant he would have had to die alone. Paul passed away at home just before the second lockdown was announced.
He said to me, "Can you give me a cuddle?" And I did. And I just said to him, "I think it's time for you to let go now, Paul." And he says, "I'm trying." He says, "I just want to know that you're going to be okay. Promise me you'll be okay." And I just couldn't promise.
The ebbs and flows of human life haven't stopped, but lockdown has upset them. And for those dealing with them for the first time, they're even more daunting.
When I was at the 12 and 20 week mark, there was no partners allowed to go with you. So went to all the scans on my own. So it's just been hard, really.
Emma and her husband Chris, who are both teachers, discovered they were expecting their first child at the start of the first lockdown.
We've never experienced it before, so we're just kind of a bit anxious, a bit nervous, but in an excited way.
Their baby is due to be born in the second one, and a date has been set.
I wouldn't have been so keen to have a C-section had all of this not been going on. I think it's in a slightly selfish way. At least it's one thing that we know what's happening and when it's happening, and that he'll actually be there. So that's the main thing. Don't fancy doing it on my own.
The day of Paul's funeral has come. Cathy walks hand in hand with her daughters, Laura and Kay.
I felt like I was walking through a nightmare, leading Dad out of the road. I think it was something that we felt we had to do.
Under the terms of the lockdown, only a certain number of people were allowed into the funeral service, and the sisters had to decide which mourners would have to stand outside and watch the webcast.
It was extremely difficult having to pick and choose, because then we thought we don't want to cause arguments between the family because Dad wouldn't want that. So it's put us through a difficult time.
In the last week of this autumn lockdown, Emma Owen-Jones arrived.
Well, it's nice to see you three.
4.
Don't forget the dog. Yeah.
But restrictions on numbers in the maternity ward held sway over the first few hours of family life.
I can't say enough good things about the midwives afterwards, because obviously Chris had to go. So there was a good sort of at least 4 or 5 hours that I was then on my own, not having a clue what I was doing. And, they're there at the touch of a button. You press a button, someone appears and comes and helps you with whatever you need. It's a really surreal feeling knowing that we're in charge of something really small and vulnerable and fragile.
Hopefully, once this COVID's over and done with, we can start being a proper family again. It's a rule for everybody, and you've just got to abide by it, but it's really hard. It's really hard.
Over the pain and the grief, the wonder and the joy of being human, lockdown has cast a long shadow. Geraint Vincent, News at 10, Nottingham.